I didn't hear the knock. I felt it. A heavy thud that traveled through the walls like a warning. It wasn't polite. It wasn't hesitant. It was the kind of knock that came from people who'd already decided they were coming in with or without your consent. Before I could even reach the door, it swung open. My brother stepped in first, laughing at something I didn't hear. Behind him, Syl waddled in, hand on her belly, her other arm guiding their youngest who was chewing on a toy car. The rest followed two older boys, one girl trailing behind, and then my parents. All five of them crossed the threshold like they belonged here. Like I didn't. Wow, my mother said, taking off her sunglasses as she scanned the living room. Much more spacious than I imagined. High ceilings, too. No one made eye contact. No one said hello. No one asked if they could come in. I stood still in the hallway, the bare floor cool under my feet. The smell of fresh paint and quiet comfort still clung to the walls. This house was new. Not just structurally. It was mine. The first thing in my life that didn't come secondhand or with strings attached. Feels like it was made for a family, Dan said, his voice light but his gaze calculating. And it's way closer to my job than our place. Syl drifted into the kitchen and ran a finger along the counter like she was inspecting it for flaws. Quartz, she said, impressed. Nice upgrade from laminate. Then she turned, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. That smile. The one that always meant she knew something I didn't. How did you even get my address? My voice came out steadier than I expected. My mother waved it off, her eyes fixed on the hallway closet. Oh, don't be dramatic. We just asked around. It's not a secret. It wasn't the words, it was how casually she said them. Like my privacy was irrelevant. Like I was irrelevant. The kids had already kicked off their shoes and were arguing over who got the big room. I stayed rooted. Like if I moved, it would confirm their narrative, that I was just a placeholder until something better came along. That this house wasn't a symbol of survival, just a temporary vacancy. Dan walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder like we were still 12, and he was offering me a turn after hogging the game console. You don't even have a family, he said, eyes soft with mock concern. What do you need all this space for? And there it was. The sentence that didn't just land, it echoed. Like a bell tolling for something I didn't want to bury again. He wasn't asking. He was justifying. Justifying what they were about to do. What they'd already decided. And in that moment, standing there in the home I fought to build from the ashes of everything they once laughed at, I realized something that felt heavier than anger. They didn't see me as part of the family. They saw me as a resource, a backup plan, a man with no strings and too much space. And in their eyes, that meant I owed them something. I glanced at the door, still open, still letting in cold air. But they weren't here to visit. They were here to claim. Let's talk, man to man. That's how he said it. As if the weight of the room, the unspoken pressure, could be lightened by a phrase that once meant something when we were kids. It didn't feel like a talk. It felt like an announcement with a rehearsed smile. We sat across from each other in my dining room. The chair under him creaked. He leaned back like he was getting comfortable, like this was his place to settle into. The kids need their own rooms, he began, his tone rehearsed. And with the new baby coming, we just can't keep squeezing into one place. You know how it is. I nodded slowly, but my hand stayed in my lap. My throat felt tight. Was this guilt? Anger? Something in between? And this, he gestured around the space, the high windows, the clean lines, the air I finally breathed freely in. This is perfect. For us. I opened my mouth. Dan, this is... He cut in before I could find the rest of the sentence. I mean, you've got the camper, and you're used to it by now, right? Honestly, it'd be temporary, just until we find something else. Maybe a year, tops. A year? He reached into his folder and slid something across the table. Crisp paper, ink already dry. I figured we'd do it formally, just so everything's clean. I looked down. It was a lease agreement. My name already scribbled at the bottom, except it wasn't my handwriting. It looked clumsy, rushed, not even close to my signature. Something inside me slowed down, like my mind needed more time than usual to accept what my eyes were reading. You forged this? I asked quietly. He waved it off with a half chuckle. Come on, it's not a big deal. It's just to make things easier. Look, we'll treat the place with respect. But obviously there'd need to be curfews, right? For the kids' routines. And if you need to come inside, maybe just give us a heads up first. I blinked. A heads up? For my own house? Dan tilted his head, as if I were being the unreasonable one. It's about boundaries, he said. I didn't respond. I reached for my phone, hit record. He didn't notice. He kept talking about how we'd need to organize chores, maybe some shared expenses, but no mention of rent, no mention of what I wanted, just more assumptions dressed as kindness. And as I stared at him, I realized something brutal. He didn't come to ask. He came to claim. Like this home was an upgrade he'd earned through parenthood. Like I was some placeholder, the quiet one, the one with no wife, no kids, no say. In his world, I didn't own this space. I was just borrowing it until someone more worthy came along. I didn't plan to say it. There was no dramatic buildup, no inner monologue winding itself toward courage. It just came out. Number. One word, but it didn't land like one. It crashed into silence, into assumption, into the way they'd already decided I would say yes. The room stalled like a machine catching on itself. Dan's mouth froze mid-smile. His hand was still out, like he hadn't yet registered the shift. Syl blinked, caught mid-performance, her eyebrows still raised, the corners of her mouth curling with whatever speech she'd rehearsed in the car. I repeated it, louder this time, more certain. You're not moving in, you're not staying here, and you're not going to guilt me with your fifth kid, or your job, or your lies. The forged lease, sitting on the table between us, fluttered slightly, just enough to make a sound. Like it, too, realized its power had slipped away. Dan frowned, as if I were the one being unreasonable. You're serious? After everything we just... You didn't ask me anything, I interrupted. You came here with your minds made up. You didn't knock. You didn't ask. You assumed. That's not a visit. That's a takeover. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The kind of silence people make when they're not used to being challenged by the person they're so used to stepping over. And then came her. My mother stepped forward, arms crossed tight like armor. Her voice had that shrillness I knew too well, the one that always meant she was trying to sound calm but wasn't. You're doing this for Dan. Because he needs you. Because we all need you to step up. Step up. That phrase, I'd heard it too many times. When they left me out of birthdays, step up, be the bigger person. When Dan crashed my old car and blamed me. Step up, take the fall, he's younger, he has more to lose. When I cried as a kid and was told to go to my room so Dan could get some quiet, they didn't mean step up, they meant step aside. Syl stood now, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the edge of my table like it might support the weight of her righteousness. I'm pregnant again, she said. Her voice wavered not from pain but from precision, as if she believed it was her checkmate. I looked at her. I didn't shout. I didn't flinch. And that's your responsibility, I said quietly, not mine. She blinked. Twice. Then without warning, she slapped me. The sound cracked across the room. Sharp. Hollow. Not painful, just humiliating. A statement. A warning. Dan reached for her, tried to pull her back, but she pushed past him. Her voice broke loose in waves, loud and breathless, and laced with just enough truth to sound convincing. You selfish, cold. You think you're better than us just because you got lucky? You think this house makes you superior? You don't know what it's like to raise kids in one bedroom. You don't know sacrifice. You've never had to care about anyone but yourself. I didn't move. I just let her words pass through me. I'd been on the receiving end of worse, quieter, longer cruelties. But in that moment, something shifted. Not anger. Not even sadness. Clarity. She thought this house was a fluke. She thought I stumbled into it. That it fell into my lap while she suffered. She didn't know about the camper nights, when I wrapped myself in a coat too thin for winter and prayed the battery wouldn't die. Didn't know about the jobs I worked some days, 3 at once. Didn't care that when I finally signed the deed, it was with hands that had shaken from exhaustion and disbelief. To her, this wasn't my house. It was a misfiled reward, one meant for someone louder, someone with a family. Dan stepped forward, gentler now, like he thought softening would change the math. We need this, man. I looked him in the eye. I needed a place to sleep when I was living in a truck. He looked down. No defense, no apology. You laughed, I added. You called me a drifter. His mouth opened, but there was nothing left to say, and I realized I didn't need to tell them to leave. They had never really been here in the first place. Not in any way that mattered. They were never guests, only intruders expecting gratitude. So I stood there, calm as still water, and said nothing. Because for the first time in my life, silence was mine. And I was done using it to make other people comfortable. The house was quiet again. Not peaceful, not yet, but quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when the walls still hum with leftover thunder. I stood in the living room for a long time after they left. Just stood. One hand resting on the back of a chair, the other still curled from where I'd held the doorframe too tight. Their voices hadn't really left. They lingered, stuck in the corners, caught in the fibers of the carpet like smoke, the echo of slammed drawers. A laugh that wasn't friendly. My name. Repeated like an accusation. I looked down at the lease, still sitting on the table. It was creased now. The signature, the one that wasn't mine, had a smeared thumbprint at the corner. I picked it up like it might bite me. Took a photo. Then another. I opened my phone's voice memo app and saved the recording. Not out of spite, not to go viral, just to remember that I wasn't losing my mind. They weren't going to stay quiet. They never did. By nightfall, it had begun. A vague status from my mother. Some children forget where they came from. That's the real heartbreak. Then Syl. A photo of her ultrasound. Captioned, trying to build a home for my babies, but some people only care about walls, not love. I stared at the screen. The performance. The calculated timing. The skill it takes to twist truth into something shapeless but sharp. No names. No facts. Just enough implication to make me the villain to those who didn't know the context and fuel for those who never cared to learn it. So I told my side. No dramatic build-up. No long explanation. Just the video. The moment Dan slid the forged lease across my table, smiling like it was a gift. The audio, him outlining house rules for a home that wasn't his. The photo of the forged signature, and one caption, "They tried to take my home. They didn't ask. They planned it. This is what family looks like when love is conditional." I didn't expect anything. I hit post, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. But the comments came fast. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 7 years messaged me, "I always wondered why you stopped coming to holidays." An uncle reposted the video with just 3 words. "We see you now." It wasn't outrage. It was exhaustion. People weren't surprised, they were relieved. As if someone had finally said out loud what everyone else had been too polite to name. A few still tried to smooth it over. Could have handled it more gracefully. Maybe there was a better way. But grace, I realized, had become code for stay quiet. And I'd spent a lifetime doing that already. Then came the call. Block number. I hesitated. A part of me, the smallest, most broken part, thought maybe it was one of the kids, borrowing a phone, wanting to understand. I answered. "You're a disgrace," said the voice. Low, clipped, male. "Real family men need homes, not selfish loners like you." Click. No name, no chance to respond. Not even a breath left hanging. Just the dull echo of the call ending, like a final door closing. I stayed standing for a while, phone still in my hand. Then slowly, I sat down, not on the couch, but on the floor. The cold crept into my spine. It grounded me, reminded me I had weight, that I was still here, that I took up space even if they never wanted to see it. My fingers hovered over the call history. I could have traced the number, could have texted back, asked why. But what would that change? They didn't want an answer. They wanted silence. Shame. Surrender. Instead, I stayed still. Because the truth was already out there now. That video, those words, they weren't just receipts. They were a mirror. And people had finally seen what I'd been seeing for years. And for once, I wasn't the one left explaining myself. They were. 2 days passed. Then came the truck. I turned the corner and saw it first. A bright white moving van parked squarely in my driveway like it had paperwork to prove it. The back doors gaped open, half a couch dangling off the ramp. Boxes scattered across the lawn like breadcrumbs. I blinked. Syl stood by the porch, arms folded, her weight on one leg like she was posing for a photo. She saw me and waved, not sheepishly, not nervously, like someone greeting a late guest to a party already in full swing. Behind her, the front door was open, wide. My stomach dropped. For a split second, I actually questioned reality. Was I on the wrong street? Did I fall asleep and dream my way into someone else's life? But then I saw it, my porch light, my crooked welcome mat, the faint scuff on the railing I never got around to repainting. Number, this was real. This was my house. I eased my foot off the gas and pulled over slowly, hands trembling as I shifted into park. Dan came out of the entryway carrying a box labeled Kitchen, written in CL's handwriting. He didn't look surprised to see me. "We figured you might not be home yet," he said, smiling like this was normal. "What is this?" My voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. Just settling in, he said. We didn't want to wait forever. Thought maybe once you saw it, once we were here, it'd feel more natural. Natural? You broke in. We didn't break anything, Syl called from the porch, her tone casual, rehearsed. We had a spare key. I stared at her. I changed the locks. She shrugged. You should have told someone. I didn't respond. My hands were already on my phone. I stepped back into the truck and locked the doors. Dialed 911. Through the window, I watched her storm forward, face hardening. She slammed a fist against the glass. Don't you dare call them. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You're trespassing. She leaned in, eyes sharp. I'll scratch every panel on this thing if you don't hang up. The dispatcher picked up. I stayed on the line, calm, clear. I gave them my address, the situation, and stayed inside while they screamed outside my window. Because this time, I didn't need to yell. This time, the law would do it for me. Dan came out of the entryway, holding a lamp I hadn't even unpacked yet. He looked up, smiled like we were old friends reuniting. Hey, just getting things set up. I didn't get out. I didn't even unlock the doors. I reached for my phone and called the police. Through the glass, I saw Syl mouthing something. Then she stormed over and started pounding on my window. You're being ridiculous, she snapped, her voice muffled through the glass. You're not gonna do this. Not to us. We have a baby on the way. Her hand slapped the glass. Hang up and talk to us like a grown man or I swear. She paused, looked down at the paint on my truck. I'll scratch the whole side. The 911 operator heard it all. My hands were shaking by the time the first officer pulled up. The cop walked over slowly, assessing the scene like it was just a noise complaint, not a family siege. I stepped out, finally, and said just 3 words. They broke in. The officer nodded once. Show me. We walked to the porch. The lock was gone. Not picked, not jimmied. Drilled. The old deadbolt lay on the welcome mat like a badge of entitlement. Next to it, a dusty drill and a plastic case of bits. Like they were proud of the job. I opened my mouth, but words didn't come. Dan emerged behind us, holding a folder. We have a lease, he said calmly, like he was doing me a favor. He handed the officer the papers. I stepped forward. Look at the signature. The cop flipped the last page. Even from where I stood, it was obvious that wasn't my handwriting. Not even close. The officer squinted at it, then at me. You're saying this was forged? I'm saying I never signed anything, and I can prove it. A long pause. Syl came out next, holding their toddler on her hip like a prop. We just wanted a place for our family, she said, her voice cracking at all the right notes. He said no, but we thought maybe he'd change his mind once he saw us settled in. He doesn't even use half the rooms. I stared at her, then at the baby, then back at her. You drilled out my lock. Dan shifted his weight. It's not like we damaged anything permanent. We were going to replace it. You're overreacting. That's when another car pulled in, and Eli got out. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets. His eyes flicked to mine for only a second before he dropped his gaze to the ground. His presence made no sense. He didn't speak, just stood off to the side, watching. Something twisted in my chest. Not just betrayal, confusion. Why was he here? Dan noticed too. You invited him? I shook my head. Eli didn't deny it. Didn't explain either. He just stared at the old lock lying on the mat like he recognized it. And then quietly, almost too quietly, he muttered, "This isn't how we said it would go." We? I turned to him, but he backed up like a shadow slipping off the porch. That's when it hit me. He'd known something. Maybe helped. Maybe said nothing. Maybe he'd been part of this all along. Or worse, maybe he was forced into it. The cop broke the silence. We'll need to verify signatures, and you'll all need to leave until this is sorted out. Dan didn't argue, but Syl did, tears and all. You're choosing this house over family? She looked at me like I'd betrayed her, like I'd ruined her life. But this house wasn't just a house. It was my line in the sand. And I wasn't stepping back, not again. Christmas was supposed to be quiet. After everything, I had planned it that way. Just a small group, a few cousins, an uncle, people who'd reached out after the post and said, "You were right, we're with you." There were cookies that didn't rise properly, half-burned cider, and mismatched chairs crammed into the living room. But it was mine. The tree leaned slightly to the left. I didn't fix it. I kind of liked that it leaned. No drama, no guilt, no stage lighting for someone else's show. And then the door opened. No knock. Just the sound of cold air and footsteps that didn't belong. Dan stepped in first, holding a gift bag like a peace treaty. Behind him, Syl perfectly dressed, her makeup too flawless for just dropping by. My parents followed, slow but smug, like they knew they wouldn't be turned away in front of a crowd. Silence. Everyone froze. We thought maybe we could join, my mother said. It's Christmas. No one answered. Not really. My cousin mumbled something. I think someone offered them cider, out of politeness or disbelief. They made themselves at home in the kind of way that says, we still think this is ours. And then it happened. As I was handing out mismatched mugs, I looked across the room and saw at that glance. Syl, sitting perfectly still, eyes flicking sideways. Eli, standing behind the couch, looking anywhere but at her until he did. A second, maybe less. But everything in that second said, history. I didn't say anything then. I just watched. The way he didn't refill his cup, the way she didn't speak unless someone asked, the way he left early, without saying goodbye. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I called him. You need to tell me the truth. He didn't deny it, not even for a second. It was before she married Dan, he said quietly. Years ago, it was stupid. I ended it. But when this thing with your house happened, she reminded me. Said if I didn't help her stay quiet, support their story, she'd tell everyone. My throat tightened. So you helped them break in? Number, I didn't go that far, but I stayed silent. That's on me. There it was the crack behind the performance. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just entitlement. It was manipulation. She didn't just try to steal my home. She blackmailed blood. And maybe the worst part? He let her. Because fear is louder than loyalty, sometimes. And I had to ask myself the question I wasn't ready for. If even Eli broke under pressure, who else in this family ever really stood for me? It was quiet in that full-bellied way that only happens after dessert. Plates scraped gently. A fork clinked against a glass. Someone laughed too loud at a story no one really heard. And for a brief moment, I let myself believe we'd made it through. That peace was possible, even with ghosts still seated around the table. Then my aunt spoke. You'd think she'd treat him better, she said, slicing her pie, even if he's not her real son. The room stopped moving. Forks hovered midair. Chews froze. My cousin blinked too fast. My uncle cleared his throat but didn't speak. I turned to her slowly. My aunt had gone pale. One hand lifted halfway to her mouth like she wanted to catch the words and shove them back in, but it was too late. They were already on the table, cold, exposed, irreversible. What did you say? Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Across from me, my mother, the woman I'd called that my entire life, didn't flinch, didn't even look surprised, just calmly adjusted her napkin as if someone had commented on the weather. She didn't deny it, didn't correct, and suddenly, the past wasn't blurry anymore. It sharpened. The birthdays where Dan's gifts were wrapped in ribbons, while mine came in crumpled store bags. The silent car rides home from school when I'd cry and she'd stare out the window. The way she only hugged me in public, when others were watching. The way she never defended me, not once when Dan lied, when he hit, when I begged. I looked at her and knew. She had never truly been mine. And maybe I was never supposed to be hers. She finally met my gaze, eyes calm, like she'd been waiting for this. I did what I could, she said softly. The lie sat in the center of the table, still warm. What does it mean to grow up thinking someone loves you, only to realize they were just tolerating you until you moved out? What do you do with all those memories, when you realize they were one-sided? I pushed back my chair and stood. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care who was watching. I almost missed it. The envelope looked like junk thin, off-white, no return logo, just my name in faded type. I only opened it because I had nothing better to do while the kettle boiled. Inside was a letter. Dry, formal, cold. Confirmation of disbursement. Property sold. Funds released to designated guardian. I read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't rearrange. My grandmother had left me something. Land. A savings account. A future. I was supposed to receive it at 25. I checked the firm, called the number. The woman on the phone paused when I gave my name. That estate was closed out, claimed by your legal guardians years ago. My voice cracked. They told you I'd received it? Yes, she said. It was redirected. Redirected. Sold. Claimed. Erased. All while I was sleeping in a camper outside grocery stores, and they knew. They always knew. They just didn't think I'd ever find out. I could have taken them to court. There was enough paper trails, recordings, drilled locks, a forged signature that didn't even try to match mine. Any lawyer would have had a field day. But I didn't. Not because they didn't deserve it. Because I didn't want to carry them with me anymore. I changed the locks. Added cameras. Set quiet rules for a life with no intrusions. No forced favors disguised as family obligations. Most mornings I wake early, make coffee. Open the windows just enough to let the music drift out low, bluesy, like the kind that fills space without demanding anything from you. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the camper in the yard. The paint's faded now. One wheel leans to the left. It looks tired but still standing. That thing was home once. Cold nights, canned soup, battery-powered lights. Now it sits like a monument to everything I survived. I've thought about hooking it up again. Taking it west, somewhere open. Somewhere honest. Maybe it's not running away this time. Maybe it's arriving.